So we're going to talk about media, but before we talk about media, Preston is a unique person. For anybody who works in the marketing world or works in the advertising world, you see a career path sometimes, and you see people begin their career on the agency side, almost like a consummate undergraduate. They work on different brands every day. And then they move over to the enterprise side, and they pick a brand, and it's almost like they've declared a major. Preston has done just the opposite. He spent a long time working on Lexus, knows the automobile industry in and out, and he's just recently made a move to UM as their head of planning, which is a big, massive, meaty role, looking after some of the most important brands in the world. So Preston, tell us about that journey. Like, how did you go when most people are zigging, you zagged? Tell us about your career path.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it. It's been a windy one, and I think what I've always focused on is how do I continuously learn and develop. And I spent a lot of time to start out my career on the client management side, which helps get the pulse of what clients are looking for and then try to develop solutions. But what I realized is I was the ears and I wasn't the one creating the outcomes. So I had a chance and an opportunity, thanks to my prior CEO at Team One, to go set up a performance media practice and relocate to Texas, where the Lexus client had just relocated to. In that, I got to get my hands in the mix of analytics, oversee that, the search business, everything programmatic, and anything that's audience-based. So that's getting into the weeds pretty quick and pretty deep, and I learned a ton about just the discipline itself. You learn that it's not a race to the bottom when it comes to costs, for example. It's about, if I want to create outcomes, what are those outcomes, and does that investment create those outcomes?
And so even before we go there, talk a little bit about some of the interesting things you worked on Team One with Lexus. I remember you and I were having dinner in LA last year, and we talked about some of the collaborations you were doing with other brands. Just amazing stuff.
Thank you. Yes, that's when I moved over to Lexus National, it really opened up a lot of opportunities to think big and create outcomes that last longer than a media placement. And what I mean by that is I had a chance to meet some people from Yeti. We started working together, and we had our flagship Lexus SUV coming out. And I don't think people really thought of Lexus as the vehicle you'd get for capability, but that's exactly what this vehicle provides. So combining the power of those two brands continues to live on past the event that it was built for. So it goes from show to show, shows up on social media. I think co-branding is the future of our business. I think a lot of brands are nervous to take those steps, and I think the way we were able to take a step was looking at it just like dating. You'll go out on a date, at least get to know each other. It's not like you're trying to get married right out of the gate. So I think if brands look at it through that lens, you'll get a lot more of that type of output.
So tell us about the role then at UM. Like, now here you are sitting at the head of planning. Most of the people sitting here, most of the people streaming this are in the marketing media business. Tell us about that role now.
Yeah, it's an exciting role, and it is first of its kind. And what I mean by that is UM's always had a planning practice, but not a dedication necessarily to the craft itself. And what we're going to do is we're going to kind of take a few hats off of people in the agency where you're working on multiple things, whether it's I got to negotiate, I got to go manage client, I got to plan, to now making your sole focus planning. And I think what that's going to do is allow us to kind of fill that pyramid up at the bottom and create standardization and best practices. But that, by doing that, will free up a lot of their time that was spent elsewhere to really focus on innovation moving forward.
What are some of the brands you're going to tackle first?
I want to get after all 50 plus of them. It's exciting, and I think that's another thing that setting up this planning practice will do, is it'll allow us to set the new gold standard in media, and every brand that's under UM will be able to benefit from that.
So, you know, we look at this world and it's like fits and starts since we've gone into the pandemic. feels like we're coming out of it, and then now economic headwinds are coming at us. From a planning standpoint, from a media investment standpoint, what are you seeing coming into 2023?
Yeah, as we look forward, I think it depends on the brand, and it depends on that brand's consumer. So the way we dealt with the pandemic in the past is let the consumer tell you whether or not they're interested in shopping. You get digital signals that allow you to kind of understand whether there's going to be further engagement with the brand. A lot of times I think brands panic and pull back, and that opens up the market a little bit because your CPMs become less, and you're able to get out there and keep your momentum and not let it slow down. I think as we get into 23 and 24 and beyond, we've really, as a society, got to get better at forcing ad placements versus helping people get to what they're searching for and creating those opportunities with the ad placements that you're enhancing their shopping experience versus just trying to get in their face.
So are you seeing the brands pull back on their spending? Is there optimism going into 2023, or is there pullback?
You know, I think there's still optimism, and again, you got to check that pulse every day. So I think the conversations with clients are brand new every day, and we keep the foot on the throttle where we're seeing success, and you got to back it off or rework your plan if you're not.
And what about if money gets pulled from a Twitter or a Facebook? Where do you think that money's being reallocated?
So in setting up this planning process, what we're going to do is understand the levers that need to be pulled and what each channel does for the business. You know there's certain things like a linear TV ad is going to create a certain byproduct. If that byproduct aligns with a client's objective, you're going to stay in there. So it's all dependent. When free money comes up, we will have things like, dealers always ask me this, where should I put my first dollar? And I think that's the mentality we'll have, is we'll take that dollar and we'll go to the first place, the second place, the third place until those buckets are filled.
So shameless plug for audio here. You and I, in full disclosure, we've worked together on audio campaigns. What do you see the role of audio in your war chest in 2023?
Well, I think as we're looking at 2023, everything's digital in a way now. So audio has a lot of ability to be in the hearts and the minds of people, especially if you're telling a story. It's changed where it's not about a 60-second spot necessarily. It's changed because of the podcasting industry. It's huge for the sports industry, and my belief is where our brands can be around passion points of the consumer, that's where we need to be as well. And I also think that it's important to have a mix of channels that you're speaking to them with. My daughter's 8 years old, and she sees the same TV commercial 3 times in an hour, and now she's telling me they're wasting money. So you gotta make sure that you're hitting people during different points in their journey.
Have you had success with podcasting? Have you been able to figure that out for brands yet?
Yeah, and I think it ties back to even an example with Audacy and us working together in the past. You may think a podcast doesn't resonate with the brand or the product, but it's amazing what putting a little test and learn in will do for you, and take a little chance. Because I can tell you with Lexus, the one that popped, and I won't get into too many details, I probably wouldn't have bought just because I didn't think it properly aligned, but it ended up being the best one out of the crew. So those are good learnings that you have to push further than comfortability.
And what about any thoughts on linear TV and what's going to happen in linear TV in 2023?
Yeah, I think linear TV, that those partners are kind of telling you where this business is going because they're activating their own streaming solutions. It is not completely transitioned into streaming. It's interesting because it used to be the way to get younger buyers. You just pull it out of linear and go into streaming. But I think as this continues, we're seeing that age start to come up because you're getting that older demographic adapting to it. So it's still killer for if you tell me you want website traffic via search, run a spot on Sunday Night Football, it'll be there. It's just you got to decide what you're looking for, and linear's got certain powers that help.
And what about the sub-models in general, these subscription models? We drove down from Fort Lauderdale together, and we were talking about Yellowstone, and how Yellowstone Season 5 is coming back, and Paramount saw a spike in its subs. And it's more fuel to the fire that these subs people are just going in and out of them based on content is queen, and people go in and out. Is that going to have an effect on the way that media is sold?
That's what you got to think about during the upfront process is you got so many options out there for the consumer. I think we all know there's subscription fatigue out there. People are chasing content versus being loyal to a brand. And what that makes advertisers and brands have to do is you've got to be a lot more places. And when you got to be a lot more places, you got to be a lot smarter with that dollar and where you're placing it and where you're seeing your returns.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. So what are you most excited about in the new role? I mean, I know you got a lot of work in front of you, but what are you most excited about?
I'm really excited about the fact that you can come up with solutions, and every brand has an identity, so you're not trying to give that brand the same solution as the brand next to it. But I do look at it that there are some things that are just healthy for a brand, and when you find those, whether it be a process, whether it be a tech platform, and a solution, we can now multiply that by 50 instantly plus, and you're going to level up those clients in your portfolio. So it's pretty exciting that you can have that much impact.
I know you have a team of about 600 planners around the country. What are you sort of seeing in terms of talent trends, recruiting talent? In this post-pandemic world, in the pandemic, everybody wanted to go live. He's a Montanan. Everybody wanted to go live in Montana, and that doesn't fly anymore now that we're coming back.
No, and I grew up in the retail business, so it didn't matter where you were located as long as you had the hunger and you wanted to be there, you wanted to learn and grow. And I think that's what we're starting to see is that when you find people that have that mindset, it's extremely important to cultivate their growth within your organization. And then once you've done that, retention is big. That's something that I've always focused on, is when you get good people around you, get good outcomes, and you want to take care of those that are producing.
Yeah, it's awesome. So if you had a crystal ball about where the media business is what it's going to look like at the end of 2023, what changes are you seeing that are going to happen?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because we deal with things that we don't expect on a regular basis, but I think technology will continue to bring us forward. I think people and the consumer will demand a better experience in advertising and not so much of a push, but rather a pull. I think being able to digitize is going to be helpful, especially like as we're talking about audio. You want to play with the players that are going to create the best outcomes, but you also want to respect the customer. And I think that's first. If I hit somebody too many times with messages, they're going to start to ignore it. So how do I holistically look at their journey versus looking at channel level or looking at partner level? So I think that will be the evolution, is how best do you manage that individual customer's experience.
In the last panel, somebody, I think it was the person who had the vodka business, she was talking about this, this return to real human connection.
Yeah.
And, that's one of the things I love about the audio business, particularly the live, over-the-air, or streaming radio business, is it's real human beings building these communities of listeners who are just deeply passionate about subjects, whether it be geographic communities or subject-based communities like art. This idea of real human connection is very powerful. And when brands insert themselves into those moments in really organic ways, whether it's live reads or sponsorships that are not abrasive but integral to it, to that experience, we're just seeing, tremendous brand lift. What about you on that side? How do you think about brands coming into environments in smarter ways, more organic ways, et cetera?
Yeah, I think if you look at your industry in particular with audio, it's how do I take that placement that they're hearing in their car or they're hearing at home, but then they show up to an event and that same audio message is coming through in a real life experience. I think it's important for people and consumers that care about a brand to see it in multiple lenses, because that's how you're truly going to decide whether or not you're going to put your wallet towards it.
And so there's a lot of folks who are here, there's a lot of folks online who are stewarding brands across all industries. And they want those media dollars coming to them. And now you're sitting in a position where you're allocating where media spends go. If you could give advice to brands on how best to compete for your media dollars, what would you tell them as they want to be on plans? What do brands need to do?
Yeah, I think our partnership in the past has been a good example of this, but time is currency. So what you want to do is spend your time with a partner, and brands want to spend their time with a partner that's going to deliver big ideas, things that are going to make their brand stand out beyond the placements. You can always get the placements, but I think what we'll focus on at are the partners that are going to allow us to get ahead. We got to outclass, we got to outmaneuver all of these brands' competitors, and I think relationships and being able to get to a solution faster are the key to that, because there's a lot to go through.
And as you're starting to dig into your new role and you're talking to brands, are you seeing a trend for brands being more interested in going back up to the top of the funnel, thinking about experience? Are they thinking about engagement, or is it about driving transactions? And I know the answer is all of it, but that can't be the answer right now.
It can't be the answer. And like I said, to get out of the gates, I had a concentration in performance marketing. I knew that's what car dealers loved, is the outcome of a sale. But we also were able to prove that if a brand puts some time and energy into that upper funnel, if you will, and you can all argue whether there's a funnel or not, but that will make your performance marketing more efficient, right? So I think brands understand that there's an entire cycle of that consumer's journey, and how do we best assist? Because not everybody's ready to send you their contact information. Not everybody's ready to buy, but as long as you can keep yourself top of mind for when they are ready to transact, that's the important part.
And maybe it's too early that the data's not here, but we just came off of Small Business Saturday, or Black Friday, Small Business Saturday, Cyber Monday. How do you, retailers are a bellwether for how the economy is doing. How do you think retail brands are going to step back from that chunk of buying season as we head into Christmas? What are they going to say? Was it successful?
I think just overarching, not speaking on behalf of any of the clients in the portfolio, but we saw that spending over Thanksgiving and Black Friday was super successful, and there's a lot of talk about recession and things pulling back, but the people like deals, so I think that's what the industry's been giving them right now to keep things sailing, and then we take that momentum and parlay it in the next year.
Yeah, super interesting. I know we're going to come up on time here. Should we see if there's any questions?
Any questions, anybody out there?
This is going to be a hard one, I can tell already.
It's softball. No, just curious, as certain platforms are going through turmoil, how are you advising your clients in your portfolio in terms of how they should manage their spend on those platforms? Is it on a case-by-case basis? Do you have overarching, points of view that you give them and suggest a strategy overarchingly?
Yeah, I think it's all about the risk mitigation. So the ones that are higher risk, which I'm sure we all can come up with that in our minds in the room, you don't want to necessarily put yourself in a position where your brand can be affected. So some brands live in spaces that they need that and utilize it, and I think every brand needs to figure out what it means for their brand story and their expectations for a platform. And if they don't meet that, I think you need to come out. If they meet those expectations, then you can continue to do business. So UM definitely puts out overarching when it's in high publicity moments, but otherwise more at the brand level.
Hey there. So a similar type question. So as you're consulting your brand clients, are you bullish on traditional media, or are you leaning into consumer spaces and influencers?
So I don't believe in shutting off valves, because then you lose the pulse of performance. However, I do believe in new media. And what I mean by that is the social component, you can't ignore it. So what can we do when we're working with a partner that whatever content we create, whatever outcomes we create, then live on beyond that buy? And I call that new media, where it's not as traditional. But yes, we need to move into more of the digital, more of the social, in order to really activate that base layer that we have.
And what? Go ahead. You had a question.
I was going to ask you. So with the with the cookie deprecation and the IDFA stuff, and a lot of brands thinking about utilizing that first-party data more, are you hearing more and more brands creating these data clean rooms? And if so, is that led by a planning agency, or is that done internally, or how is that typically done, and how often is that happening?
Yeah, it's actually a topic, and one of the major reasons I went to UM is their data privacy and how much of an importance it is to the agency. And what we need to do is make sure that we are utilizing that data in order to enhance the customer's experience, but never abuse, and ensure that we're following all the rules, because they can continue to get tighter and tighter. And we've got a tremendous leader in that department that keeps us ahead of the business.
So just to follow up with that question, first-party data is the holy grail, right? Because you can customize an experience, you can reach an individual versus reaching a group. In a cookieless world, how do you gather that? How do you build robust, actionable, first-party data that has efficacy?
So my belief is that the major players in the tech space are going to have access to the first-party data. I think brands as well as agencies need to ensure that they're learning to play nice with each other, because again, it gets back to that customer experience. You don't want to have a first-party data activation over here and then parlay that into 100 different first-party activations, and they can't see each other, so you don't understand the duplication. So I think that's probably the future, is brands forcing some of these tech companies to play nicely so that we can look at the consumer's journey holistically.
And when you say tech companies, those are the Amazons of the world, the Walmarts, who are just holding just the most robust, intimate consumer data that's out there now.
Yeah, and you're seeing brands be willing to monetize it now. So Marriott came out with the ability to activate within their network. Walmart, to your point, there's a lot of value there, and that might tie back to also the reason to start figuring out more co-branding in general, so that you have those partnerships in place.
Well, I'll just wrap up here real quick to say, I have the privilege of working with your peers across all the holdcos. I'm just so excited to see what you're going to do and shake it up. You're a great partner, so thanks for spending time today.
I appreciate it.
All right.
Any other questions? I have one question about retail media. With the explosion of so many retailers getting to it, do you see like a big shift in media spending moving over toward retail media versus, typical broadcast or internet properties?
Yeah, I think it's dependent on the industry you're in. We have a tremendous shopper program that was designed at UM to attack exactly that. I, again, believe that having some awareness, some desirability messaging out there is going to drive that retail experience later, but you will see dollars flow through there, absolutely.
But you haven't been seeing that yet, really? Not in a big way? Have you already been seeing that?
No, we're seeing some of our clients get heavily into it, absolutely.
Anything else, guys? It's a great topic, so we're going to make sure we get everything out. Thanks so much.
Thank you.